I think, you know, what you're saying is it really makes a lot of sense, because it's the first couple states. It's a test to see how people are feeling. What do you think is the most important issue for voters today? I know that it keeps going back and forth, national security, the economy. What do you hear when you speak with voters today in terms of what they want from a candidate?
I think it's a perspective of what kind of leadership do you want. I mean, what type of person do you want leading this country in a world that's unstable, in an economy that doesn't seem to be getting on track, and where people are just looking for answers, and someone that's going to get this job done. And I think that's really what presidential elections are all about. It's very different than a midterm. You know, in fact, I think midterms are far more issue-driven, even in some ways more candidate-driven, and it sounds odd to say it that way, but when you have a smaller electorate, that's what happens. But ultimately, and I'm not sure if you heard what I was talking about before, at some point in this conversation, especially after March 1st, when so many states go, the narrative is going to get to delegate count, because the delegates of the Republican Party on the floor of a convention choose the nominee. And so these state contests direct delegates to act a certain way, but ultimately it's in Cleveland in July when those delegates on the floor are going to choose who the Republican nominee is.
So based on the number of delegates, then, what states are you looking at closest?
Well, look, I mean, obviously the first states are really important. We all know that, and that's why these test cases are so important. But, you know, you look at the March 1st Super Tuesday, it's proportional, but it's going to tell you a lot about the strength of these campaigns to compete in multiple state-type contests. Then you get to March 15th, which is in most cases a winner-take-all primary, and I think on the 16th of March, we're going to have a pretty good idea of the direction of this race. And so tonight's the first night, and as you've all talked about, and you did it correctly, it's all about who turns out. And with so many candidates, obviously they're all pushing their pockets of people to turn out.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Here's Senator Scott Brown.
Let me ask this to you. I think after, and Reince obviously as well, I think obviously after Iowa and New Hampshire, you're going to see a few others drop out. And as we move forward in this process, you're going to, as Reince is saying, get a more realistic feeling about the numbers and the specific issues. The lower tier candidates, after they're out of money, they can't compete on the big basis. So you're going to have a shift, I think, in the you know, where those folks end up.
Reince, you agree with that?
Well,
we'll start seeing people this list narrowing down now.
Well, I mean, he's right, because there's not enough hard money to go around. I mean, you actually, in order to compete in New Hampshire and South Carolina and the next state and the next state and the next state, you need a lot of cash to pay people on the ground. And so what I look for tonight or in New Hampshire or South Carolina is something that you don't expect. I mean, that's when things can change, momentum moves and shifts. So things that happen that you don't expect is what you look for out of a day like today.
Here's David Webb, Reince.
Reince, good to see you again. The question is a rules question, because the American people need to understand the difference between a contested and a brokered convention. And education, we've talked about this before. Explain the difference for people.
Yeah, sure. Well, you know, there's a lot of words to use. The first word, a brokered convention, is something that just doesn't happen. In the old days, all the delegates would run in their own states. They'd show up at a convention, and they would actually vote right then and there. There was no conversations like this about Iowa and New Hampshire. They just went to the convention and voted. But the brokers were people that had votes in their pocket. So it might be the state delegation chairman of Wisconsin. He's got 50 or she's got 50 votes in her back pocket. She goes to the candidate and says, hey, you know, I've got this or I've got that. What can we get over here? That just doesn't happen anymore, because we have rules that say you can't vote in a block like that. So the correct word is a contested or an open convention, which just means that a candidate is going to the convention without the majority of delegates already committed to them. And if that happens, then that's when you get to a contested or an open convention. But you never have a situation where you have a brokered convention. So highly unlikely, but that's the distinction, David.
Do you feel like the candidates at this point on the Republican side have been able to articulate their plans and their beliefs, their policies to the American people. I mean, the debates now, 7 debates, have they had the opportunity to be heard on the important issues that are key for America?
Yeah, no, I think so, Marie. I mean, look, we've got 24-hour news. You've got a great program. People can go anywhere they want to get their information on the internet, on you know, satellite radio, all over the place. Clearly, this is a process that is a long process. There's plenty of time. And then you also have these test cases where if people can't get out to the entire country, they can get to New Hampshire and Iowa and make their case and drive around and talk to people. And so this is the great American way. And so what happens tonight is really important in that process. We're looking forward to getting this thing started. The debates have been great. There's been plenty of them. And we're really satisfied with where we're at so far in the process.
But, Reince, does it make you nervous with more than 7 years with President Obama in the White House, lackluster economy, slowest recovery since World War II, wages not growing? However, people maybe don't want more of that. They want to go even further left. You look at the record number of people that have given to Bernie Sanders. They look at the Obama administration and say, hey, he wasn't liberal enough. I want more government. I want higher taxes. I want Uncle Sam to take care of my life. Doesn't that worry you?
Well, sure. I mean, free always sounds great, except when people realize how it's all going to get paid for. So, yeah, it worries us. I mean, and you look at Hillary Clinton, which, you know, so we haven't talked about this, but it just really does tell you a pretty good story about what's happening with her. I mean, the fact that you have a former First Lady, Senator, Secretary of State that is really losing to this gadfly from Vermont who's not even a Democrat in Iowa, or at least tied in New Hampshire. It tells you a lot about her situation and her emails. You've talked about that. You know, does she get indicted? Does she get a gross negligence charge? No one really knows. I think the odd part about all of this conversation, not just this one, but for now months, is that it's possible and maybe likely that the Democrats are going to have a more unsettled primary in 60 days than the Republicans.
Yeah.
And who would have thought that?
You're right.
6 months ago? But here we are.
Yeah, it's true. Well, there's a lot of uncertainties.
I mean, they're adding 3 debates now to their schedule because it's not because it's not working out. It tells you a lot. I mean, when they start adding debates in March and April and May.
It does tell you a lot because they've been like burying these debates, right, Reince? I mean, doing it on a Saturday night.
Right.
And doing it during playoff season.
Yeah, no, we don't.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it tells you, when you see these polls, you know, Hillary should be acting like an incumbent, and she's behind most of our candidates already. It's pretty bad for her. She's going to have a tough sell to the American people. When people don't trust you or like you, that's a bad place to be.
Reince, good to have you on the program this morning. Thanks.